Hello, everyone. So we are beginning with lecture one of lesson 38, in which our main focus is going to be a major transformation in the Roman Empire, initiated primarily by the Emperor Constantine, also known as Constantine I or Constantine the Great. Its key importance in sort of Western history is that he will be the first emperor who we will know claim that he is a Christian, and there will be associated transformations all around the empire. But to pick up the story where we left off, we were talking about the emperor Diocletian, depicted here on the right, who essentially was able to resolve the crisis of the 3rd century, in which you recall major break-ins in most part of the empire essentially led to a breakdown of all systems of government. Diocletian also established a new governing arrangement known as the Tetrarchy for the 4 leaders it had, 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars. And we can see this on the map, including the division between the eastern and western part of the empire, and between main emperors and their Caesars, right, who are their associates. The original plan that Diocletian had is that this arrangement would last 20 years. And then essentially the people who were the Caesars would take over, they become the Augusti, and then they would use new Caesars to support them. But this plan, as it was at first, only partially worked, insofar as as they began in the east and west, as the Galerius Caesar stepped up to be the Augustus, and then in the west, Constantius Chlorus did the same. However, because of the death of Constantius Chlorus, his Caesar stepped up very fast, and soon, in particular in the west, some changes occurred that led to the rise of Constantine, who we will see here. Here's for the first time as Caesar to 2 different Augusti. So Constantine, known as the Constantine the Great or Constantine I as well, is a very tricky historical figure. And the reason for that is that many, in fact, most of our sources, with some exceptions that we will note, were written by Christians. So, for example, Eusebius's Life of Constantine was written by Eusebius, who is a church father, and clearly he has an investment in a particular depiction of the story of Constantine. And even though it was written sort of relatively soon after Constantine's life, so even though it's contemporaneous, but it's a very charged, powerful account in which it is taken for granted that Constantine is a Christian. So first, we're going to look at a little bit at this narrative, and then we're going to think a little bit about, is there any evidence that might challenge the straightforward narrative in which Constantine converts to Christianity, and then he converts the whole empire to Christianity. To start, though, I wanted to just mention something that I find usually really helps my students to engage with the role of Constantine. And this map about the rise of Constantine and his eventual control of the whole Roman Empire is really good in helping us understand that he essentially starts right up here in the as west as you can get in Britain, where he was first acclaimed emperor in the year 306. And then we see him sort of slowly starting to control western provinces. Then we will see that in 312 and 313, he becomes, he gets control of these pink areas, so that is North Africa, as well as Italy. And then we see that in 316, he is able to add a little more, and eventually getting rid of his original ally. After 324, he will be able to get the whole empire united under his rule. So this kind of west to east direction is is just noteworthy for how he gained his power. A key moment in this history takes place right here, just outside of Rome in October of 312, and is known as the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. The main bridge itself, this is what it kind of looks like, is just a bridge across the Tiber River next to Rome. And it is a battle in which Constantine defeats Maxentius, who is the person who is otherwise in control of the territories here in pink. And this is a key military victory that essentially will secure him as in charge of all of the western parts of the empire. Nevertheless, something else happens at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge that's really critical in terms of this transformation. And let's take a look at how Eusebius describes it. So this is his Life of Constantine, chapters 28 and 29. And so this is Eusebius saying about Constantine, that Constantine said that about noon, when the day was already beginning to decline, he saw with his own eyes the trophy of a cross of light in the heavens above the sun, and bearing an inscription, "Conquer by this." At this sight, he himself was struck with amazement, and his whole army also, which followed him on this expedition and witnessed the miracle, right? So we have a miracle. There is a vision that he has of a cross of light, and it comes with an inscription that says, "Conquer by this." And then in chapter 29, he said, that is Constantine said, moreover, that he doubted within himself what the import of this apparition could be. And while he continued to ponder and reason on its meaning, night suddenly came on. Then in his sleep, the Christ of God appeared to him with the same sign which he had seen in the heavens, and commanded him to make a likeness of that sign which he had seen in the heavens, and to use it as a safeguard in all engagements with his enemies, right? So first a vision, a daytime vision, then a dream, both of them confirming the same message. And the image that then gets put on, so commanded him to make a likeness of that sign which he had seen in the heavens, and to use it as a safeguard in all engagement with the enemies. That sign looks something like this. And it is looks like XP, but in fact, these are Greek letters. So this is Chi, and this is Rho. And the way we sort of visualize, of course, this means the name of Christ, Christos, and that Constantine supposedly, after he had his vision, had this sign put on all the shields of his soldiers. And then, of course, the next day, in October of 312, he encountered Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and he was successful in that battle, and that essentially confirmed for him both his sort of potential to rule the empire, but also that Christianity was the way for him to go. And so in terms of the developments of chronology, so the Battle of the Milvian Bridge leads him to win the West. And following year in the East, Licinius beats Maximianus Daia and wins the East. And the two of them essentially will come to this arrangement in which Constantine will be in charge of the West and a bit, and Licinius will be in charge of the East. Now, the collaboration between these two men, Constantine the Great and Licinius, is also expressed in an edict that the two of them supposedly issued in Milan, although there is a lot of historical debate about this. But it does seem to be the case that Constantine and Licinius met near Milan, Mediolanum, as it was known in Latin at the time. So when I, Constantine, and I, Licinius, met near Mediolanum, and were considering everything that pertained to the public welfare and security, we thought, among other things which we saw would be for the good of many, those regulations pertaining to the reverence of the divinity ought to certainly be made first, so that we might grant to the Christians and others full authority to observe that religion which each preferred. Okay, so in 313, CE, as it should be, the Edict of Milan, issued by these two men, allowed Christianity as a completely legally permitted religion, as it allowed also non-Christians to practice whatever religion they wanted. And the argument is sort of at its most straightforward. From this, any divinity whatsoever in the seat of the heavens may be propitious and kindly disposed to us and all who are placed under our rule. So the hope is that the god or gods would be kind or forgiving, right? And so this edict has been sort of discussed in history for a long time. And one of the questions, of course, that's immediately comes up is, how is this possible? Like, how could they possibly be this progressive and be willing to tolerate two such traditionally now conflicting religions? You remember, since the middle of the 3rd century CE, we have seen these two really conflict, how they could do that. And I think that it's really helpful, first of all, to think of this as a compromise solution, right? I don't think Licinius is that interested in making Christianity an accepted religion, but he is interested in working with Constantine. And so this is a compromise. But even more importantly, we have to ask that famous question, namely, who benefits, right? And as the edict continues, we get some sense about who really benefits from the edict. So as the text goes, moreover, in the case of the Christians, especially, we esteemed it best to order that if it happens, anyone heretofore has bought from our treasury, from anyone whatsoever, those places where they were previously accustomed to assemble, concerning which a certain decree had been made and a letter sent officially, the same shall be restored to the Christians without payment or any claim or recompense, and without any kind of fraud or deception. Those, moreover, who have obtained the same by gift are likewise to return them at once to the Christians. So what's happening is that when Christianity is now declared acceptable as a religion, nothing changes for non-Christians. But for Christians, when they were persecuted, they essentially would lose all their property. They would lose their gathering places, right? So if there was a house, that was identified as a Christian house church, they could lose that house. And now, one outcome of this edict is that the Christians are restored to their former property. And so if you really ask the question who benefits, then it seems that really it is the Christians who mostly benefited from this edict. And I think this early action on the part of Constantine to convince Licinius and to make this compromise has been one of the drives of the argument that Constantine, in fact, became a Christian at this time, and that his faith drove him to work towards giving back Christians their property and to allow the Christian worship to go ahead in full. Now, one problem with this argumentation is that this is most of the text that we get, right? So we have Eusebius and we have a few other sources, most of them trying to argue that Constantine was a Christian. Now, of course, we are historians, so we are opening our mind to some other possibilities and some other sources. And the most important sources that we can use to challenge this straightforward narrative is that Constantine continued to issue coins. On this one here, this is Constantine here on the right, very victorious. And next to him is a sun god, which is definitely not a Christian concept. And the two of them are depicted same size, incidentally pretty impressive, on this coin. Or on this coin here is Constantine, and on the other side, we see the same unconquerable sun god. And so the point that matters about all of this is that I think in the kind of narratives in which it's all about faith and faith only, we are missing out on Constantine, the politician, Constantine, the Roman emperor, who is in fact creating something of a balancing act between, on the one hand, possibly developing a Christian faith and possibly being invested in supporting Christianity on the one hand, and on the other hand, the long history of a very non-Christian empire in which the symbols of power were in fact not at all conducive to Christian representation, right? So for example, all the pagan gods, the whole of the imperial cult, the idea of how triumph was connected to sacrifice, those things don't work so well for a Christian emperor, or somehow you have to balance these two things. So if as historians we are thinking about Constantine, I think while the Christians might want to call him Constantine the Great because they sort of would represent him as sort of the person who first made Christianity allowed, right, and acceptable religion in the Roman Empire, what we could say is that the real achievement is this sort of succeeding in this balancing act of not completely just turning against the pagans and saying, oh no, you're out and your symbols are out and I'm never going to use any of that again, but sort of trying to move things forward, embracing some of that pagan symbolism, such as, for example, we can see on this coin. How, nevertheless, his rule changed not only that non-Christian context, but in fact, Christianity itself is where we will pick up the story in the next lecture.